Earlier, we talked about how, when a vine evolves into something with beneficial characteristics, you can take a cutting and propagate it into many identical vines. This is called clonal selection. However, the big problem with clonal selection is its lack of genetic diversity. While it can be great to have identical vines growing really consistent fruit, it leaves you vulnerable. A disease that attacks that particular genetic sequence could potentially wipe out your entire vineyard, killing everything. Many people fear a repeat of the dreaded phylloxera outbreak that wiped out the majority of vines in Europe. If you have a more diverse genetic pool for your vines, it's much less likely that something could have such a devastating effect. But the clonal selection can also be seen as very scientific and perhaps a little bit boring. Burgundy expert Alan Meadows wrote an open letter to US winemakers, urging them to move away from using single clones. I would analogize the challenge of crafting great Pinot Noir using only one specific clone to that of trying to recreate Van Gogh's Starry Night with a palette limited to one colour. There is therefore an ancient technique which is still in use in some vineyards today, known as the Massale Selection. Here, rather than bringing young cloned vines in from a nursery, we accept that the vineyard is full of many different vines. We take cuttings from some that are doing particularly well, and we stick them in the ground, and up pops a brand new vine. You do this when an older vine needs replacing because it's died or has got some kind of disease, leaving a gap in the row, and this is just part of life in a vineyard. Now, because grapevines mutate so quickly, Massale Selection has rendered Old World planting so genetically diverse that one vineyard might contain thousands of naturally occurring cultivars. Generally, we do this process early in the spring when the sap's starting to rise up and the vine is coming out of dormancy. We simply take a pruning of last year's wood, known as the cane, and we cut it back to 4 buds. That's planted in the ground, leaving one single bud above the ground. The 3 buried buds somehow realise that they're in the soil, and rather producing a regular shoot, they make roots. The one that is above the ground pops up a shoot, makes leaves, and suddenly the plant is established. At the end of that year, it's all tidied up and you start the normal process of training it to grow grapes. This process of picking the different vines from across the vineyard helps keep the genetic diversity and builds up a nice resilient vineyard with a whole variety of different flavour profiles for the winemaker to pick from. It's undoubtedly more work, but you can do things differently on different patches of your vineyard, for example where you get more sun or where there's an underground water source, anything that would make the vine grow differently. And many winemakers are starting to see this as a real selling point. In 2007, when Sashi Mormon was preparing to plant Bloomsfield, a parcel at one of our favourite producers, Domaine de la Côte in California, he thought along these lines. The idea was to create a California super Massale vineyard. Mormon said, when it comes to making interesting Pinot Noir, it seems that having these slightly different interpretations of the terroir brings more complexity to the wine. Careful vineyard management and winemaking keeps the details from being muddled. So, do keep your eyes open for bottles marked as Selection Massale or Massale Selection, and you might get yourself a nice little treat